Virtual Holy Land Tour, where you get to see the Bible come alive from the comfort of your own home. The Temple Mount in Jerusalem has never been excavated, but an illegal construction project 20 years ago opened the door to some major discoveries.
2,000 years. A chamber beneath the Temple Mount, sealed and forgotten, untouched since before the fall of Rome. Until now, researchers breached the final stone threshold and found a stone basin, burned incense, blackened oil lamps, and words carved in a script older than any Hebrew alphabet. He who dwells here, his spirit never leaves. This was the Holy of Holies, the innermost chamber of Solomon's temple, lost to history for millennia, now uncovered.
Solomon finished building the temple, most likely built over this same protruding rock of Mount Moriah.
And what they found inside is far stranger, more dangerous, and more powerful than anyone could have imagined. The catastrophe. To understand what was found, you first have to understand what was almost lost forever. In 1999, bulldozers began tearing through soil beneath the Temple Mount. The Islamic Waqf, the religious authority that administers the surface of the mount, and had decided to construct a new underground mosque in an area known as Solomon's Stables. The project was conducted without archaeological supervision. It was unauthorized by Israeli antiquities authorities, and it involved the removal of hundreds of truckloads of earth from beneath one of the most historically significant sites on the planet. That soil, saturated with 3,000 years of human artifacts, was hauled out and dumped in the Kidron Valley outside the old city walls.
We are now in the Kidron Valley, also known as the Josaphat Valley or King's Valley. This is the eastern border to Jerusalem from ancient times.
Treated like construction debris, discarded like it meant nothing. To understand why archaeologists around the world were devastated when they learned what had happened, you need to understand what the Temple Mount actually is. This 35-acre limestone plateau is not just historically significant. It is arguably the single most sacred piece of ground on Earth, and three of the world's major religions agree on that point while agreeing on almost nothing else. For Jews, this is Mount Moriah, the place where Abraham was asked to sacrifice Isaac, where King Solomon built the first temple nearly 3,000 years ago, where the Ark of the Covenant was housed in a chamber so sacred that only the high priest could enter, and only once per year. That temple was destroyed by Babylonians in 586 BCE. A second temple rose on the same ground and stood for centuries before Roman legions burned it to the ground in 70 CE. For Muslims, this is the noble sanctuary, the place from which the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven. The Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque stand here today. For Christians, this is where Jesus walked, taught, and overturned the tables of the money changers. Three faiths, one hilltop, and a political arrangement so fragile that a single misplaced shovel could ignite an international crisis. That is why for over a century, the secrets beneath the Temple Mount remained untouchable. Not because archaeologists lacked the technology or the desire, because the consequences of disturbing this ground were too dangerous to risk. Governments, religious authorities, and diplomatic bodies all understood the same thing. Whatever lies beneath the Temple Mount has the power to confirm narratives, destroy narratives, and reshape the geopolitical landscape of the entire Middle East. Every nation with a stake in Jerusalem, and there are many, has spent decades carefully maintaining a status quo that allows all three faiths to coexist on this hilltop without open warfare. That status quo depends on ambiguity. It depends on nobody being able to prove, definitively, whose story is carved into the oldest stone. The moment physical evidence emerges that tips the balance, the ambiguity dissolves, and the consequences become unpredictable. So the ground stayed sealed, the questions stayed unanswered, and generations of archaeologists retired or died knowing that the greatest discoveries of their field were sitting beneath their feet, tantalizingly close and absolutely forbidden, until the Waqf's bulldozers changed everything, not by carefully excavating the truth, but by accidentally scattering it across a garbage dump, the sifting. When Israeli archaeologist Gabriel Barkay saw those truckloads of sacred soil being hauled to a landfill, something broke inside him. Barkay was not a young man chasing his first discovery. He had already made one of the greatest archaeological finds of the 20th century. Tiny silver scrolls inscribed with the oldest biblical texts ever recorded.
Now, this is quite a discovery. Fragments of a biblical scroll, along with other relics, have been found in desert caves in Israel.
Predating the Dead Sea Scrolls by centuries. He had spent his entire career studying Jerusalem's ancient past. He understood, with a clarity that most people never achieve in any field, exactly how rare and irreplaceable the contents of that soil were. Every bucket of earth dumped into the Kidron Valley contained potential discoveries that could rewrite history books, settle centuries-old debates, and connect the modern world to civilizations that had vanished into dust. And it was being treated like landfill. He knew that every hour that soil sat exposed to weather and contamination, thousands of years of irreplaceable evidence were being destroyed. His colleague Zaki Devira shared the same fire. Together they launched what became known as the Temple Mount Sifting Project. The concept was simple, the execution was monumental. Operating out of a public park in East Jerusalem, they began the painstaking process of recovering what had been lost. Volunteers arrived from around the world. Day after day, year after year, they sifted through that discarded earth by hand. Bucket by bucket, fragment by fragment, grain by grain. What emerged from that soil was staggering. Over 500,000 artifacts, coins from the time of Herod the Great, arrowheads from the Crusader era, jewelry from Islamic periods, pottery shards spanning dozens of civilizations, each one a frozen moment from a different century, a different empire, a different version of Jerusalem. The sheer volume was overwhelming, but it was the older artifacts that made researchers hold their breath. Because mixed in with the Roman coins and Crusader arrowheads were objects that should not have survived.
A Roman coin that has baffled historians, thought to have been a fake for hundreds of years.
Objects from the First Temple period, objects that had been buried beneath the mount for nearly 3,000 years. Every shard, every fragment, every bead and coin and broken seal was a voice from the dead, whispering through dirt that someone had tried to throw away. The volunteers who sifted this earth, teenagers and retirees, and theology students and atheist archaeology enthusiasts, all of them understood that they were holding history in their hands in the most literal sense possible. Some of them cried, some of them laughed, most of them just kept sifting because the pile was enormous and every bucket might contain the next discovery that rewrote a chapter of the human story. The discovery that changed the trajectory of everything came when a volunteer noticed a small hardened lump of clay, flattened and cracked with age, almost invisible in a handful of dirt. Under magnification, it revealed itself to be a bulla, an ancient seal impression once used to secure official documents. The inscription was Paleo-Hebrew, a script used before the Babylonian exile. It read, "Belonging to Gedaliahu, son of Immer." The name Immer appears in the book of Jeremiah as a priestly family active during the First Temple period. And this tiny piece of clay, smaller than a thumbnail, confirmed the existence of a real person mentioned in Scripture. Someone who had lived and worked on this very site nearly 3,000 years ago. More bullae followed, names and titles that aligned with biblical records, symbols depicting menorahs, temple gates, priestly garments. And here is where it gets interesting. These First Temple artifacts were not distributed randomly throughout the soil. They concentrated in specific areas, clustering in patterns that pointed toward particular sections of the mount. Sections that corresponded with ancient textual descriptions of the most sacred zones. The Sifting Project had not just recovered lost artifacts, it had accidentally created a map, breadcrumbs scattered by bulldozers leading back to something specific, something still buried, to something sealed. The hidden network. Between 2021 and 2024, a new generation of researchers began combining cutting-edge technology with overlooked historical documents. Their focus was the southern edge of the Temple Mount, near the Western Wall tunnels. British surveyors during the Ottoman and Mandate eras had mapped strange underground voids in this area. Chambers and staircases and hollow spaces that defied geological explanation. But for generations, those reports had gathered dust in archives, dismissed as incomplete or unreliable. The new team decided to verify them using ground-penetrating radar, the same technology that had detected hidden chambers inside the Great Pyramid of Giza.
Great Pyramid of Khufu here at Giza is the culmination of hundreds of years of trial and error in pyramid building.
The scans revealed something remarkable. Beneath the bedrock, these straight edges and geometric shapes appeared where natural geology should have produced only irregular stone. The signatures of man-made construction sealed away for centuries. When researchers overlaid the radar data with those hand-drawn British maps from the early 1900s, the outlines matched. The same corridors, the same blocked staircases, the same suspicious voids. A century of technological advancement had just confirmed what Victorian-era explorers had suspected but could never prove. Then came the physical breakthrough. As workers carefully cleared debris from an ancient Herodian structure in the Western Wall tunnels, they uncovered a partially buried staircase carved into limestone. It descended into darkness. At the bottom, they found a forgotten antechamber. The upper walls bore Byzantine-era carvings, faded crosses and inscriptions from the 4th or 5th century. This space had clearly served as an early Christian worship site at some point, which itself was extraordinary, evidence that Christians in the late Roman period had identified this specific underground location as significant enough to warrant secret worship. But when researchers examined the floor, they discovered something far older beneath it. The foundation stones were massive, finely cut ashlar blocks stacked with a precision rarely seen after the First Temple period. These were not Byzantine additions. These were not Herodian renovations. These stones had been placed here when David's dynasty still ruled, when the temple still stood, and when the smoke of sacrificial offerings still rose from this hilltop into a sky that ancient Israelites believed opened directly into the throne room of God. And then came the detail that made the entire team go silent. A secondary staircase, half collapsed and filled with rubble, led even deeper into the bedrock. It had been deliberately blocked, not by natural collapse, not by the slow accumulation of centuries, by human hands, intentionally, thoroughly, permanently. Someone, long ago, had wanted whatever lay beyond that blockage to remain untouched until the end of time. As researchers mapped the areas surrounding these sealed chambers, they discovered a vast network of underground cisterns, channels, and aqueducts carved directly into the bedrock. The system was interconnected, engineered with a sophistication that defied expectations for its era. Carbon dating of mineral residue around the plaster linings produced a result that stunned the team. These waterworks were not Roman. They were not Herodian. They dated to the First Temple period, the 8th to 9th century BCE. To put that in perspective, when these channels were being carved, Rome was a collection of mud huts on the banks of the Tiber. Athens had not yet built the Parthenon. The Persian Empire did not exist. And here, beneath a hilltop in Jerusalem, engineers were designing hydraulic systems that rival anything built in the ancient Mediterranean world. But the age was not what shocked the experts most. It was the design. The system demonstrated hydraulic planning far ahead of its time. Narrow feeding tunnels allowed rainwater runoff to fill reservoirs in ways that prevented stagnation. Overflow channels redirected excess water to secondary chambers, preventing flooding while maintaining supply. The engineering accounted for pressure, flow rate, and seasonal variation in a region notorious for brutal dry summers. This was not primitive infrastructure thrown together by people who did not know better. This was sacred engineering, precision-built, purpose-driven, designed to serve something specific. When researchers overlaid maps of the cistern network with ancient textual descriptions, connections emerged that had never been made before. Several cisterns aligned perfectly with locations mentioned in the Book of Chronicles, which described water preparations made by Israelite kings to support temple rituals. One particularly large basin sat beneath a spot that, according to Hebrew texts, had once held the altar of sacrifice. That basin was lined with thick layers of ash and faint traces of organic residue, signs of repeated use over many generations. Ritual hand-washing, cleansing of ceremonial tools, libation offerings poured into stone that remembered every drop. This was a machine of holiness, engineered to sustain the most elaborate system of worship the ancient world had ever seen, and the channels led directly toward those sealed chambers that no one had entered in over 2,000 years. The Stone of the Shekinah. The lead archaeologist, Dr. Yuval Baruch, felt his pulse hammering in his ears as the team moved carefully through the darkness, past the ancient water channels, past the buried priestly chambers, past the blocked staircase that someone had sealed with such deliberate finality. The passage narrowed. The air grew thick with a staleness that felt almost physical, the weight of centuries pressing against their skin. This was air that had not been disturbed by human lungs since before the Common Era.
First, they were spotted in human blood, and now traces of microplastics have been found deep within our lungs.
And there, at the end of a corridor that had not seen light since the time of Rome's Republic, they found a sealed stone threshold. Baruch's hands trembled as he helped remove the final stones. For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The weight of what they were about to see pressed down on every person in that tunnel like a physical force. Flashlight beams cut into the darkness beyond the threshold and found something that the modern world had never seen. The chamber beyond was small, no more than 10 feet across. In its walls were cut straight into bedrock, smooth and undecorated, austere in a way that felt deliberate rather than incomplete. This was not a room that had been abandoned mid-construction. This was a room that had been finished exactly as intended, stripped of ornamentation, reduced to stone and silence and whatever invisible presence the builders believed would fill the empty space. And what sat in the center stopped every person in their tracks. A stone basin, round and shallow, half buried in ash. Around it, fragments of burned incense, small offerings, and blackened clay oil lamps.
These type of oil lamps, which have menorahs on the top. Now, why menorahs?
Arranged with a care that felt less like archaeology and more like prayer. Unlike other spaces that had collapsed naturally over centuries, this chamber had been deliberately preserved. Whoever sealed it had not been hiding something they wanted to forget, and they had been protecting something they wanted to last forever. The basin bore markings, faded by millennia but legible under the archaeologists' lights. The script was Paleo-Hebrew. Baruch leaned closer. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. He who dwells here, his spirit never leaves. One of the younger researchers, Dr. Sarah Mizrahi, had tears streaming down her face before anyone had spoken a word in response. They all sensed what they were looking at. They just could not bring themselves to say it out loud, because those words were not random poetry. They were not a general blessing or a dedication to some minor official. They aligned with ancient biblical descriptions of only one place in existence, the Holy of Holies, the innermost chamber of the temple, where, according to scripture, the Shekinah, the divine presence of God, was said to physically dwell, a space so sacred that only the high priest could enter, and only once per year on the Day of Atonement. No artifact from that space had ever been recovered. No physical evidence of its existence had ever surfaced. For centuries, scholars debated whether the descriptions in scripture were literal or metaphorical, whether the temple's inner sanctum was a real physical place or an idealized vision written long after the fact. This chamber answered that question with stone and ash, and words carved by hands that had stood where the presence of God was believed to rest. The dating was verified through multiple independent methods. The oil lamps matched other examples from the 8th to 7th century BCE. The basin's limestone composition was consistent with materials used during Solomon's reign. The inscription's phrasing and structure were identical to phrases found in First Temple-era religious texts, some of which had only been recovered from the Dead Sea Scrolls in the 20th century. Cross-referencing with known Paleo-Hebrew epigraphy confirmed the letter forms as consistent with the period. Every line of evidence pointed to the same conclusion, and every expert who reviewed the data arrived at the same place, standing in stunned silence at the edge of what it meant. This chamber delivered what generations of archaeologists had dreamed of finding: physical, datable evidence of the most sacred zone beneath the Temple Mount, evidence that aligned directly with biblical tradition, evidence that transformed ancient text into tangible, touchable reality. For 3,000 years, And the only proof that the Holy of Holies had ever existed was the word of Scripture. Now there was stone, now there was ash, now there were words carved by human hands, preserved in darkness, waiting patiently for the moment when someone would come and read them again. Someone, thousands of years ago, had left a message, a testimony carved in rock to ensure the truth would never be forgotten, no matter how many empires rose and fell above it. The revelation and its consequences. The discovery sent quiet shockwaves through the academic world, but the announcement has been careful, fragmented, and deliberately measured. The authorities who know what was found understand the implications with terrifying clarity. The Temple Mount remains sacred to 3 global religions. Any claim that one tradition's narrative has been definitively validated by physical evidence could ignite crises that spread far beyond Jerusalem's walls. This discovery is, in the words of one unnamed diplomatic source, a lit match in a room full of gunpowder. The responses have been as divided as the faiths themselves. Some Christian communities see the find as prophetic fulfillment, tangible confirmation that the biblical accounts were not myth or metaphor, but historical record written by people who were there. Evangelical scholars have called it the most significant archaeological validation of Scripture since the Dead Sea Scrolls, though they caution that its full implications will take decades to understand. Some Orthodox Jewish leaders have responded with caution that borders on mourning. The discovery confirms what the faithful always knew, yes, but disturbing the area associated with the Shekinah without proper spiritual preparation remains, in their view, a transgression of the highest order. For them, this discovery is not triumph, it is trespass. A line crossed that perhaps should not have been crossed, regardless of what it revealed. Islamic authorities have remained largely silent, though sources suggest intense concern about how the findings might be used to advance territorial or political claims. The delicate status quo governing the Temple Mount, an arrangement that has prevented open conflict for decades, has never felt more fragile. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, the scientific race has begun. Researchers are now lobbying for access to deploy muon imaging technology, the same particle scanning method that detected hidden voids inside the Great Pyramid of Giza in 2017. Muon imaging works by measuring the natural rain of subatomic particles that pass through solid matter from cosmic rays. Dense stone absorbs more muons than empty space, creating a kind of X-ray of whatever lies beneath the surface without moving a single stone. The hope is that without disturbing the surface, without so much as scratching the stone above, they can map additional chambers that may still lie sealed beneath the mount. The radar scans have already revealed at least 3 additional voids that have never been breached. One sits directly beneath the dome of the rock itself, measuring approximately 40 feet across. Researchers believe this void may contain the largest undiscovered space beneath the entire Temple Mount. What lies inside remains unknown. The political and religious barriers to investigating it may never be overcome, or they may crumble overnight if the right discovery forces the right hands. And so the stones have spoken, if only in whispers. 2,000 years of silence, and yet the message survives. Waiting, patient, unyielding. What else lies beneath the Temple Mount, still sealed from the light? What truths have been buried so deeply that the world above may never be ready for them? Every footstep on that hilltop echoes across centuries, carrying questions we are only beginning to ask. The doors are cracked, but not open. Shadows linger in the corridors, and secrets wait for someone brave, or reckless, enough to uncover them. And when the next one moves, will we be ready to see what has been waiting for millennia? Or is some knowledge meant to remain in darkness?